Something happened 14 hours ago that no living scientist has ever seen before. And the moment I tell you what it is, you are going to question everything you thought you knew about our solar system and about what is out there watching us. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope captured an event this morning that carries a 0.00001% probability of being natural. Let that number sink in. Not rare, not unusual, statistically, practically impossible. And yet, it happened. An object known as 3I Atlas, originally classified as a rogue interstellar comet, just altered the fundamental composition of Saturn's rings. It did not crash into them. It did not disturb them gravitationally. It bleached them. It converted ancient, brilliant, reflective water ice spanning 4,000 kilometers into something completely transparent, as if someone had erased a chunk of Saturn's most iconic feature from the visible universe entirely. NASA's Cassini mission spent years building a detailed data baseline for Saturn's ring system. Those rings are solid. They are reflective. They are stable. What the instruments are showing right now has absolutely no precedent in the entire history of modern astrophysics. None. And scientists are not quietly scratching their heads. They are scrambling. Here is what the raw data tells us. An object traveling at 87 kilometers per second passed within 1.2 million kilometers of Saturn. As it crossed that threshold, it emitted a localized thermal pulse, a coherent, focused wave of energy. Within moments, a 4,000 kilometer section of Saturn's B ring vanished from the visible spectrum. Not destroyed, not scattered, vanished optically. The mass remained exactly where it was. The particles stayed in formation. But their molecular structure had been reorganized from the inside out, dropping their reflective index by 99.8%. In practical terms, 3I Atlas turned a massive section of the solar system's most famous feature into an invisible window. Right now, astrophysicists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory are trying to explain how an inert, airless rock could possess the thermodynamic capability to phase shift 33 billion tons of ice without vaporizing a single gram of it. They cannot, because nothing in our standard models accounts for this. The odds of this occurring naturally sit at 1 in 8.4 billion. In 4 million years of cometary observation across this entire solar system, no interstellar visitor has ever interacted with a planetary body in any way remotely resembling this. The European Space Agency independently verified the anomaly through their own orbital observatories and immediately issued an emergency bulletin. When institutions of that caliber initiate emergency protocols over a passing comet, you stop and you pay attention. To grasp the full scale of what we are dealing with, picture this from Earth's perspective. A piece of Saturn has been erased, not the mass, that is still there, not the gravity, still pulling. Only the light has been stolen. The ring is still physically present, but our instruments can no longer see it. It has become a ghost, a transparent, gravitationally active, physically real ghost drifting silently around the planet. And to understand why this is so deeply unsettling, we need to go back to where this all began. 3I Atlas was discovered on October 12, 2025. When it first appeared on Deep Space Network telemetry, analysts assumed the readings were sensor calibration errors, because what the data described was simply not possible. But before we get into what the object did, we need to understand what made this object different from the very first moment it was detected, long before it ever came close to Saturn. Because that is where the real story starts. And the further we go into this data, the more the universe starts to feel like something else entirely is writing the rules. From the moment 3I Atlas entered our detection range, something felt wrong. Not subtly wrong, fundamentally, unmistakably wrong. And the scientists who first analyzed its trajectory knew it immediately. When NASA's Deep Space Network first captured its telemetry in October 2025, the initial reaction in the analysis room was disbelief. Interstellar objects are not new. We have logged them before. But 99.8% of all known comets, natural ones, behave in a predictable, well-documented way. They shed mass as they approach the sun. They develop a glowing coma of gas and dust. They leave a visible tail streaming behind them across millions of kilometers. 3I Atlas did none of that. It remained perfectly inert. no coma, no outgassing, no tail. A cold, completely silent object cutting through the darkness at a hyperbolic trajectory so extreme it could only have originated from outside our solar system entirely. It was moving too fast. And some analysts quietly noted early on, it seemed to be moving too deliberately. But the real alarm did not come until April 22, 2026, at exactly 3:14 UTC, when the object crossed Saturn's ring plane at a precise angle of 87.63 degrees. At that moment, NASA's JWST NIRCam instrument recorded an immediate 99.8% drop in the albedo, the reflectivity, of the targeted ring section. ESA's orbital observatories confirmed the localized phase shift independently using advanced spectrographic sensors. The ALME Band 7 receivers in Chile cross-referenced the region's thermal emissions. 3 completely independent observatories, 3 entirely different methodologies, 1 identical conclusion. This event should not exist. There is no natural explanation that fits the data. Now let's talk about the physics, because this is where conventional science simply breaks down. Saturn's rings are not solid bands. They are a chaotic, swirling debris field composed of water ice particles ranging from microscopic dust grains all the way up to massive boulders the size of houses. In their natural state, these ice particles are highly reflective. That is why Saturn glows so brilliantly when you observe it through a telescope, sunlight bouncing off billions of frozen water crystals. But 3I Atlas did not simply reduce that reflectivity. It restructured the crystalline lattice of the ice itself at a molecular level. Here is the clearest way to picture it. Grab a handful of crushed snow. It appears white because its chaotic internal structure scatters light randomly in every direction. Now imagine a localized energy field sweeping through that snow and instantly reorganizing every single water molecule into a flawless, continuous, diamond-like crystalline structure. The light no longer scatters. It passes directly through. That is precisely what NASA's Hubble Wide Field Camera 3 confirmed at 9:12 UTC. An entire 4.00-kilometer arc of chaotic frozen debris transformed into a perfect optical medium, not by heat, not by pressure, not by any mechanism we understand. Consider how impossible this truly is. If you take a block of opaque crushed ice and apply intense heat to it, it melts into water and then evaporates into steam. It does not reorganize its crystal lattice into optical glass while remaining frozen solid. That physical process does not exist in our thermodynamic models, yet that is exactly what happened. The pulse from 3I Atlas did not push the ice particles aside. It forced the crystalline structures of trillions of individual ice boulders to align perfectly, rendering them optically transparent without vaporizing a single molecule. And then a third impossibility emerged. Saturn's magnetic field lines around the equatorial region began warping around the transparent ice section. Each new observation was more inexplicable than the last. Then came the confirmation that made laboratory floors go quiet around the world. The transparency was actively spreading. At 1422 UTC, the bleached edge had expanded by an additional 140 kilometers. This anomaly was not static. It was alive, growing, and no one could explain why. The numbers were definitive. NASA confirmed the expansion at 11 o'clock UTC. Something out there was still actively working on Saturn's rings. And whatever it was doing, it was only getting started. At this point in the data, most scientists reached for the simplest available explanation. An extraordinarily rare natural event, an unusual combination of gravitational, thermal, and electromagnetic factors producing a once-in-history anomaly. Unlikely, but possible. The universe is vast. Strange things happen. But then April 23rd arrived, and the simplest available explanation was no longer available at all. Let us start with the numbers, because the mathematics here are not ambiguous. The probability of an interstellar object emitting a thermal pulse at the precise frequency required to restructure ice at a molecular level sits at roughly 0.17%. The probability of Saturn's ice particles naturally aligning their quantum states due to a passing gravitational wake sits at approximately 0.00003%. Now multiply those two probabilities together. Two separate, independent, astronomically unlikely events occurring simultaneously in the same object, across the exact same 400 kilometer section of ice within the same millisecond. The resulting number is so infinitely small it defies human comprehension. Researchers have compared it to winning the global lottery every single day for 1,000 consecutive years. In 4 million years of cometary observation, nothing even remotely resembling this combination of phase shifting and structural manipulation has ever been recorded. Even Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard, who has spent his entire academic career rigorously analyzing interstellar anomalies, publicly stated that the mechanical precision demonstrated here cannot be explained by outgassing or magnetic flux. When a scientist of that standing openly questions the foundational physics of an astronomical event, it is not a casual observation. It carries enormous weight. And when JPL initiated an emergency classification protocol for raw telemetry shortly after, the weight became something far heavier. But here is what truly changed everything on April 23rd. At exactly 1842 UTC, NASA's Deep Space Network logged a new telemetry reading that was entirely absent from every predictive model. Something had shifted in the bleached ring section, not structurally, but functionally. The transparent ice began exhibiting a unified refractive index of precisely 1.31. For context, that figure is an exact match for perfectly pure, zero-gravity, vacuum-frozen water. Every particle across that entire 4,000 kilometer section was now behaving not as individual chaotic debris, but as a single, unified, contiguous optical structure. A cosmic debris field had become a lens, a 4,000 kilometer wide magnifying glass assembled from the frozen wreckage of Saturn's ancient ring system, confirmed independently by JWST, Gaia, and LMA. The implications of that single confirmation were staggering. This was not a byproduct. The transparent ice was now magnifying background starlight by a factor of 4.2, focusing it into a localized beam. From a quantum physics standpoint, the object had forced the ice into a state of Bose-Einstein condensate light coherence, but at macroscopic temperatures entirely inconsistent with that phenomenon. Our models have no category for this, no framework, no precedent. Researchers at Caltech and MIT, independently reviewing the same data, reached the same conclusion. The conventional models for ring disturbances involve gravitational shepherding and particle collisions, but those models produce chaos, not precision. What was observed here was the opposite of chaos. To sculpt a planetary ring into a flawless, unified optical instrument while traveling at 87 kilometers per second requires not just enormous energy, it requires control. Directed, localized, sustained, and impossibly precise control. And then the fourth anomaly arrived. The transparent ice section began emitting a faint secondary resonance, a vibrational frequency. ALMA's receivers in the Atacama Desert recorded it clearly, 432 hertz, a mechanical impossibility for a vacuum-sealed debris field where sound cannot propagate. And yet, two entirely independent detection systems confirmed the exact same frequency. At this point, the data was no longer suggesting an unusual natural event. The data was suggesting something that the scientific community was deeply reluctant to say out loud. The European Space Agency's telemetry confirmed it directly. The crystal alignment of the bleached ice was being maintained by an active electromagnetic field, a field drawing power from Saturn's own magnetosphere, the rings of Saturn, for a 4,000 kilometer stretch, had been engineered into a functioning cosmic instrument, and whatever had built it was not done using it yet. Everything described so far, the four structural anomalies, the impossibility statistics, the emergency bulletins from ESA, the Bose-Einstein coherence, the 432 Hz resonance, all of it was documented and verified by April 23, 2026. A paradigm-shifting discovery on its own, the kind of data that reshapes careers, rewrites textbooks, and defines generations of scientific inquiry. But on April 24, 2026, at exactly 4:12 UTC, the situation changed in a way that no one in the scientific community was remotely prepared for. 3I Atlas did not just bleach Saturn's ice to create a passive window. It actively used what it had built. The object, now 1.4 million kilometers past Saturn, emitted a secondary high-intensity coherent light pulse. It fired a directed beam straight into the section of the B ring it had restructured, the transparent ice, perfectly aligned as a flawless cosmic magnifying glass, caught that beam, amplified its strength by a factor of exactly 10,000, and refracted it with surgical precision toward Earth's orbital path. That alone would have been extraordinary. But encoded within that amplified beam was something that stopped every scientist in the room cold. The signal contained a recognizable structure, a mathematical pattern humanity had encountered before, because humanity had created it. The beam carried a modified version of the Arecibo message, the signal Earth broadcast into deep space in 1974. The original Arecibo transmission was humanity's most complex, deliberate communication to the cosmos, a binary encoded message describing our mathematics, our biology, our solar system's position, and our physical form. What came back through Saturn's converted ring lens was that same architectural framework, but with two critical changes. The human DNA sequence originally embedded in the message had been completely removed. In its place was an unknown triple-helix carbon-silicon molecular structure that matches no known biological template in our databases. The probability of natural electromagnetic radiation spontaneously mirroring the Arecibo message's structure while simultaneously substituting a coherent alternative biological code is 0.00000001%. That number is not a rounding error. That is a 1 followed by 9 zeros in the denominator. Pause here and consider what this means across every possible explanation. If this is a bizarre natural reflection of background radiation bouncing off restructured ice, then our entire framework for quantum optics in a vacuum is fundamentally broken. If this is a calibration glitch in the Deep Space Network's receiver software, then our most advanced planetary defense detection systems are compromised in ways we do not yet understand. And if this is an intentional, mechanical manipulation of a planetary body, constructed to serve as a deep space signal amplifier and then actively fired to transmit a modified, targeted message directly to Earth, then we are tracking what astrophysicists classify as a Type II civilization on the Kardashev scale, a civilization capable of harnessing the energy output of an entire star. And that civilization did not randomly drift through our solar system. It deliberately engineered our planetary rings, constructed a cosmic instrument from Saturn's own frozen debris, and sent a mathematically complex message back to the species that first reached out in 1974. Within 3 hours of receiving that modified Arecibo transmission, NASA took a step that is completely without precedent in the agency's history. They initiated a total, indefinite blackout of the Deep Space Network's public telemetry feed. The data streams that astronomers, researchers, and space agencies around the world rely on went dark. Simultaneously, an emergency closed-door meeting was convened at the Pentagon with senior Department of Defense officials. In decades of studying theoretical physics and tracking extraordinary astronomical events, an interagency lockdown of that magnitude has never occurred in response to a cometary observation, not once. That single institutional decision communicates the gravity of what is currently being processed behind closed doors more clearly than any official statement ever could. NASA does not shut down public data access for an unusual comet. They did exactly that. And when you combine that action with everything the data has already shown us, the bleached ice, the cosmic lens, the 432 Hz resonance, the modified Arecibo signal, the unknown triple helix biological code, the picture that emerges is not comfortable. It is, however, absolutely undeniable. Let us establish with absolute clarity what we know to be factually documented and independently confirmed as of today. First, 3I Atlas altered a 4.00 kilometer section of Saturn's B ring into a perfectly transparent, unified optical lens. Second, this structural phase shift carries a statistical impossibility rating of 1 in 8.4 billion. Third, NASA, ESA, and LMA have each confirmed these anomalies through independent observation using entirely different detection methodologies. Fourth, The object utilized the lens it constructed to amplify and transmit a modified version of humanity's own 1974 Arecibo message directly back toward Earth, substituting human DNA with an unidentified triple helix carbon-silicon structure. These are not theories derived from speculation. These are documented, verified, cross-referenced observations sitting in scientific databases right now. But one question remains entirely and deliberately unanswered. The one question that no official briefing, no emergency bulletin, and no public statement has yet addressed. Who or what is actively engineering the frozen debris of our solar system to establish a direct, mathematically complex line of communication across interstellar space? Because the answer to that question does not exist in a gray zone. There are exactly 3 possible realities, and only one of them is true. The first possibility. This is an unprecedented natural phenomenon that happens to mimic synthetic precision at every measurable level. If that is the case, then our entire foundational understanding of astrophysics, thermodynamics, quantum optics, and electromagnetic behavior in a vacuum must be completely rewritten from scratch, not revised, not updated, demolished and rebuilt. Every textbook in every university physics department on Earth becomes a historical artifact rather than a working manual. The second possibility, 3I Atlas, is an ancient autonomous probe, a machine launched by an intelligent civilization perhaps millions of years ago, executing a pre-programmed survey of solar systems it encounters. No active intelligence is currently operating it. It is simply doing exactly what it was designed to do. If that is the case, then the universe we thought we inhabited alone is not the universe we actually live in. We are officially, irrevocably not alone. And somewhere in the cosmos, or somewhere in deep history, another intelligence reached a level of engineering capability that allowed it to build objects capable of restructuring planetary bodies while traveling between stars. The third possibility is the one that prompted a classified briefing at the Pentagon. 3I Atlas is not ancient and autonomous. It is being actively directed, in real time, by a highly advanced intelligence currently operating within the boundaries of our solar system. An intelligence that identified our 1974 transmission, traveled here in response, engineered our planetary infrastructure to construct an amplifier, and sent back a mathematically deliberate reply containing a biological signature we have never seen before. If that is the case, then human history does not continue as a linear progression from where we stand today. It fractures. There is a before, and there is an after, and we are living in the precise moment of that fracture. There is no middle ground between these 3 realities. One of them is what is actually happening, and the clock determining which one is not slowing down. As this video reaches you, the Deep Space Network is still collecting raw telemetry from the ongoing modified transmission. Every hour brings new observations that are currently classified at levels above what is publicly accessible. In exactly 48 hours from the time of this recording, 3I Atlas will cross the orbital path of Jupiter, positioning itself for whatever comes next in this sequence of events. Every global optical telescope of significance is now permanently pointed at the anomaly. Every orbital detector is live. The data stream is continuous and relentless. From a quantum standpoint, what is actively unfolding is genuinely staggering. 3I Atlas is rewriting the molecular architecture of our solar system's planetary rings while simultaneously transmitting encoded signals through the instrument it constructed from those same rings. The amplified transmission is changing. The directed communication is ongoing, and the entity responsible, whether ancient machine or active intelligence, is demonstrating a command of physics so far beyond our current capability that the gap is not measured in decades or centuries of advancement. It is measured in something far larger. We have covered an enormous amount of ground in this analysis, and I want to make sure the full weight of what we have documented lands with absolute clarity before we close. Because the temptation, the very human, very understandable temptation, is to file this away as something distant, something happening to a planet hundreds of millions of kilometers away, something that belongs to scientists and government agencies and classified Pentagon briefings. But that is precisely the wrong way to think about this. What 3I Atlas has done is not an isolated astronomical curiosity. It is a demonstration. Every step of this sequence, the inert trajectory, the precise thermal pulse, the molecular restructuring of Saturn's ice, the construction of a 4,000 kilometer optical lens, the amplified transmission of a modified Arecibo message. Every single step of that process was calibrated. It was measured. It was aimed. The message came back encoded with a replacement for our own DNA. That is not a coincidence. That is a response. And the entity that composed that response knew what our DNA looked like because it received our original message and understood it well enough to edit it. To alter the reflective index of 33 billion tons of matter without producing a single microgram of vapor outgassing means the energy transfer involved was executed at an efficiency of 100%. Zero waste, zero error. For comparison, the most advanced laser systems ever engineered by human civilization operate at approximately 40% energy efficiency. What demonstrated perfect thermodynamic efficiency at planetary scale was not using our technology. It was not even using a recognizable version of any physics we have formally described. And yet it operated within our solar system, on our neighbors' rings, using our own transmission as a template. The spectrographic signature from ESA's Gaia spacecraft adds one more layer that refuses to be explained away. The transparent ice section is emitting a secondary resonance, vibrating at 432 Hz consistently and continuously. A sound frequency sustained in a vacuum across a debris field spanning thousands of kilometers, confirmed by two completely independent detection systems on opposite sides of the planet. Sound does not propagate in space. This frequency should not exist. It exists, and it has not stopped. What makes this moment genuinely historic, beyond the physics, beyond the statistics, beyond the impossibility stacked upon impossibility, is the institutional response. NASA does not shut down public telemetry for comets. ESA does not issue emergency bulletins for passing interstellar rocks. The Pentagon does not convene classified meetings about planetary ring anomalies. All three of those things happened within a 24-hour window. The collective weight of those decisions, made simultaneously by the world's most advanced space agencies and the most powerful military institution on Earth, tells you something that no official statement has yet confirmed publicly. They know this is not normal, and they are figuring out what normal means now. In 48 hours, 3I Atlas crosses Jupiter's orbital path. Whatever the next phase of this sequence involves, the object will be deeper inside our solar system, closer to the inner planets, and better positioned for whatever it plans to do next, if planning is indeed what is occurring. The Global Observatory Network will not look away. The detectors will not go offline. The data will keep arriving. And at some point, whether through a formal announcement, a leaked classified document, or simply the weight of undeniable accumulating evidence, the public conversation about what is happening in our solar system right now will have to shift fundamentally. The universe is not what we were taught it was. The physics we inherited is not the complete picture. And something out there, ancient or active, mechanical or conscious, has just confirmed both of those things in the most direct, measurable, scientifically documented way imaginable. The rings of Saturn are different today than they were 48 hours ago. The signal in the deep space network is different. And if you have been paying attention throughout this entire analysis, you already understand that we may be different too, because the message that came back was not addressed to our planet. It was addressed to our biology. If this video made you stop and think, share it. Not because the algorithm needs it, but because this conversation deserves to be wider than it currently is. Subscribe for continuous updates as new telemetry data clears classification and becomes available to the public. Comment below with what you think the third possibility really means, because the discussion happening in this community is exactly the kind of sober, informed analysis the moment demands. The data is out there. The clock is running. And the question of what comes next belongs to all of us.